The moment my fingernails scraped against that small black box, zip-tied beneath the rear axle of my brand-new car, the whole world went silent. I remember the exact sensation, the cold, smooth plastic against my fingertips. The way my heart stopped mid-beat, then started again, pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples, my throat, the backs of my eyes. The morning sun was warming my back as I lay on that cold asphalt, but inside I had turned to ice. Not angry, not sad, not even shocked, really. Just cold. The kind of cold that settles deep into your bones when a suspicion you've been carrying for months, a suspicion you've been telling yourself is paranoia, is ingratitude, is your own damaged imagination, suddenly becomes undeniably, physically real. I stayed there for a long moment, lying on my back in that parking lot, staring up at the undercarriage of the silver Hyundai Tucson that my mother-in-law had given me 4 months earlier. The gift that was supposed to prove she finally accepted me. The gift that came with a red bow and a speech about family and a smile that almost reached her eyes. The gift that, I now understood, had never been a gift at all. It was a leash, and I had been wearing it without even knowing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stories like this, stories of betrayal of family, of the slow unraveling of trust, they don't start with the discovery. They start long before that. They start in the ordinary moments, the quiet breakfasts, the polite dinners, the small compromises you make because you love someone and you want their family to love you back. So let me take you back to the beginning, back to the version of me who still believed that kindness could melt even the coldest heart. The version of me who smiled through every passive-aggressive comment, every backhanded compliment, every subtle act of control disguised as generosity. The version of me who thought, if I just try a little harder, she'll finally see that I'm good enough for her son. Her name was Beverly Ann Thornton, my mother-in-law. And this is the story of how a silver Hyundai Tucson almost cost me my marriage, my sanity, and my sense of who I was. I married David Michael Thornton on a Saturday afternoon in late September, 4 years ago this past fall. The ceremony was at a small Baptist church in Marietta, Georgia, the same church where David had been baptized as an infant, where his parents had exchanged their own vows 35 years earlier, where his father's funeral had been held 6 years before I ever entered the picture. I remember standing at the back of that church, my father's arm linked through mine, watching David wait for me at the altar. He was wearing a navy blue suit, not black, because he said black felt too formal, too stiff, and he wanted to feel like himself on the most important day of his life. His hands were clasped in front of him, and even from that distance, I could see them trembling slightly. He was nervous. My steady, solid, unshakable David was nervous. And I loved him so much in that moment that I thought my heart might actually burst. The light was coming through the stained glass windows in these warm amber sheets, painting everything gold and rose and honey. The leaves outside were just beginning to turn, that first hint of autumn color that makes Georgia look like it's catching fire in slow motion. My mother would have called it wedding weather. Perfect. Blessed. My mother wasn't there, of course. She'd been gone 5 years by then, breast cancer that moved so fast, we barely had time to understand what was happening before she was simply gone. One day she was complaining about a lump she'd found, and 4 months later I was standing at her graveside in a black dress that still had the tags on it because I'd bought it in a daze and forgot to remove them. I thought about her constantly on my wedding day. I wore her pearls. I carried a small photo of her tucked into my bouquet, invisible to everyone but me. And when I said my vows to David, when I promised to love him in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death parted us, I felt her presence beside me, warm and approving. But there was another presence in that church, too. Sitting in the front pew, wearing a cream-colored dress and a hat with a small veil, her posture perfect, her expression carefully arranged into something that resembled joy but didn't quite reach it. Beverly. She watched me walk down that aisle with eyes that never warmed, never softened, never truly welcomed. And even in the midst of my happiness, even surrounded by flowers and music, and the man I loved waiting to become my husband, I felt a small chill pass through me. like a cloud crossing the sun, brief, almost unnoticeable. But there, David and I met 3 years before the wedding, at a friend's housewarming party in Buckhead. I was 26, working as a dental hygienist at a family practice in Smyrna. He was 28, a logistics coordinator for a freight company near Kennesaw. We were introduced by mutual friends who thought we'd hit it off. And we did, though not in the dramatic, love-at-first-sight way you see in movies. It was quieter than that, slower. He made me laugh with a terrible joke about supply chain management. I made him laugh by accidentally spilling red wine on his shirt and then trying to clean it with club soda, which only made it worse. We talked for 3 hours in the corner of that party while everyone else danced and drank and forgot we existed. By the end of the night, I knew 3 things about David Thornton. 1, he was kind. Genuinely, deeply kind, not in a performative way, but in the way that showed up in small gestures. The way he thanked the bartender by name. The way he asked about my job and actually listened to the answer. The way he walked me to my car at the end of the night and waited until I was safely inside before heading to his own. 2, he was steady. He had the kind of calm, grounded energy that made you feel safe just being near him. Like nothing could truly go wrong as long as he was there. Like the world might be chaotic and unpredictable, but David Thornton was a fixed point you could always navigate by. And 3, he was devoted to his mother. He mentioned her 4 times in that first conversation. His mother's pot roast recipe. His mother's opinion on Atlanta traffic. His mother's health scare last year that turned out to be nothing but gave them both a fright. His mother's house that he helped maintain since his father passed. At the time, I thought it was sweet, admirable even. So many men I dated seemed embarrassed by their families, eager to distance themselves from their roots. But David spoke about his mother with genuine affection, genuine concern. I didn't realize then that devotion and enmeshment are not the same thing. I didn't realize that some bonds, no matter how loving they appear, are actually chains. But I would learn. Oh, I would learn. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. 2 years of Friday night dinners and Sunday morning farmers' markets. 2 years of learning each other's rhythms, each other's silences, each other's fears. He was afraid of disappointing people. I was afraid of being abandoned. We fit together like puzzle pieces, each of our broken edges finding a home in the other. We moved in together after a year, a small apartment off Roswell Road with popcorn ceilings and beige carpet, and a kitchen so narrow you couldn't open the oven and the refrigerator at the same time. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I hung herb planters in the window, basil, mint, rosemary. David mounted a TV above the fireplace that didn't work. We adopted a fat orange tabby from the shelter and named him Professor Whiskers because David said he looked distinguished. On Friday nights, we'd order Thai food from the place down the street and watch old episodes of Forensic Files until one of us fell asleep on the couch. On Saturday mornings, we'd make pancakes together, standing side by side in that tiny kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing. It was simple. It was good. It was the kind of happiness I'd stopped believing was possible after my mother died. But there was always Beverly. She lived alone in a 3-bedroom ranch-style house about 20 minutes south of us, in one of those neighborhoods where the lawns were immaculate and the neighbors waved but never really talked. The house was full of David's childhood, trophies and photos, and the furniture that had been there since before he was born. She kept his room exactly as it had been when he left for college, like a shrine to a son who had never really left. David's father, Harold, had died 6 years before I came into the picture. A heart attack at the breakfast table on a Tuesday morning. Beverly found him slumped over his eggs and toast, already gone. She never remarried. Never dated. Never, as far as I could tell, even considered moving on. David was her only child, her whole world, the single fixed point around which her entire existence revolved. And then I came along. The first year of our marriage, Beverly called David every single day. And when I say every day, I don't mean a quick check-in, a simple, how are you, love you, goodbye. I mean multiple calls, morning, lunch, evening. Sometimes late at night, when we were already in bed, when David's phone would light up on the nightstand and he'd answer it in a whisper while I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. "She's just lonely," he'd tell me afterward, sliding back under the covers. "You know how hard it's been for her since Dad passed." And I did know. I understood loneliness. I understood grief. I understood the desperate need to hear the voice of someone you love just to confirm they still exist, they're still there, the world hasn't taken them too. So I said nothing. I smiled. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd adjust, that eventually she'd loosen her grip and let us breathe. But the calls didn't slow down. If anything, they increased. If David didn't answer, she'd call me. If I didn't answer, she'd text, always with that edge of panic disguised as concern. "Is everything okay? I haven't heard from David. Please have him call me. It's urgent." It was never urgent. Not once, not ever. One time, the emergency was that she couldn't find the TV remote. Another time, she wanted David to come over and move a potted plant from one side of her porch to the other. Another time, and this one I'll never forget, she called at 11:30 at night, crying, saying she thought she heard someone trying to break into her house. David threw on his clothes and drove 20 minutes in the dark, his heart pounding, ready to protect his mother from an intruder. It was a raccoon. A raccoon had knocked over her garbage can in the side yard. He didn't get home until almost 1 a.m. He had to be at work at 7. "She was scared," he said, climbing back into bed. "What was I supposed to do, ignore her?" I didn't answer. I just turned over and closed my eyes and told myself again that it was temporary, that she'd adjust, that this was what family looked like, and I was lucky to have one at all, even if it came with complications. But a part of me, a small, quiet part, was starting to keep count. The Sunday dinners were mandatory. That's not how David described them, of course. He called them tradition. He said his family had always gathered on Sundays, ever since he was a child. His father at the head of the table, his mother serving pot roast or fried chicken or collard greens, the good china laid out like they were expecting royalty. After Harold died, the tradition continued. Just David and Beverly now, and then David and Beverly and me. Every Sunday at 4 p.m., we drove to her house. Every Sunday, I sat at her table and ate her food and tried, God, how I tried to make conversation, to connect, to find some common ground with this woman who was so important to the man I loved. But Beverly didn't want common ground. She wanted me to know my place. She never said anything overtly cruel. That wasn't her style. Beverly's weapons were subtler, the raised eyebrow, the slight pause before a compliment, the way she'd look me up and down when I walked through the door, cataloging every flaw. "Oh, Naomi, that's an interesting hairstyle, very bold. You're wearing perfume. It's quite strong, isn't it? I hope David doesn't get one of his headaches." I made David's favorite pie for dessert, sweet potato, the recipe his grandmother taught me. "I know you prefer store-bought, but I thought we'd do something special tonight." I never preferred store-bought. I'd never said anything about store-bought pie in my life. But she said it with such confidence, such certainty, that for a moment I wondered if I had and simply forgotten. That was her gift, making you doubt your own memory, your own perception, your own worth. After those dinners, I'd sit in the passenger seat of David's truck and feel something heavy settling in my chest. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, something in between, a weariness that went deeper than exhaustion. "She doesn't like me," I said once, about 6 months into our marriage. David sighed. He kept his eyes on the road. "She's just protective. She's been through a lot. Give her time." "How much time?" "I don't know, Nay. As much as she needs." I turned and looked out the window, watching the Georgia pines blur past, and I thought about my own mother. How she would have welcomed David with open arms. How she would have fussed over him, fed him, asked him about his work and his dreams and his childhood. How she would have loved him simply because I loved him, and that would have been enough. But Beverly didn't operate that way. Her love wasn't given freely. It was rationed, controlled, withheld until you proved yourself worthy, and even then held at a distance, like a treat you might earn if you behaved. I was tired of behaving. But I kept smiling, kept trying, kept showing up to Sunday dinner with a bottle of wine she never drank and a hope she never rewarded. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You love their family too, even when their family makes it almost impossible. The pregnancy comment came about a year into our marriage. We were clearing dishes after Sunday dinner, me washing, Beverly drying, David in the living room watching football with the volume too loud. It was such a domestic scene, such an ordinary moment. I remember the smell of dish soap and the warmth of the water on my hands and the way the late afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window. "So," Beverly said, her voice casual, almost offhand, "have you and David talked about children?" My hands stilled in the soapy water. "A little. We're not in a rush." She picked up a plate, dried it slowly, set it on the stack. "Well, you're not getting any younger. What are you now, 30? 29. Almost 30. She said it like a diagnosis. "The doctor told me that fertility drops significantly after 30, something to think about." I didn't respond. I just kept washing dishes, my jaw tight, my heart beating a little faster. "Of course," she continued, "David's always wanted children. A big family, actually, 3 or 4 kids. He told me that when he was a teenager. Did he tell you that?" He hadn't, or maybe he had and I'd forgotten. Either way, her point was clear. "I'm just saying," Beverly said, setting down her dish towel, "that time moves faster than you think, and David deserves to be a father. It would break his heart if that never happened." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing at the sink with pruned fingers and burning eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn around and say, "Who are you to tell me when to have children? Who are you to decide what David deserves? Who are you to act like I'm some obstacle standing between your son and his happiness?" But I didn't. I just finished the dishes, dried my hands on the towel she'd left behind, walked into the living room and sat beside David, who put his arm around me and kissed my temple without taking his eyes off the screen. "Everything okay?" he murmured. "Fine," I said. "Everything's fine." It was the first lie of many. The second year of our marriage was when I started to notice the patterns more clearly. Beverly's need to know, her need to be involved, her need to be at the center of every decision, every plan, every detail of David's life, and by extension, mine. She asked questions constantly, not curious questions, invasive ones. Where were we going for vacation? Why hadn't we chosen somewhere closer, somewhere she could join us? Why were we looking at apartments in that neighborhood instead of the one closer to her house? Why had I scheduled my dentist appointment on a Tuesday when Tuesdays were when she liked David to help her with yard work? She called our landlord once. I still don't know how she got the number to ask about our lease agreement. She wanted to know if we were planning to renew or if we were looking at houses. The landlord, confused, mentioned it to me the next time I dropped off the rent check. "Your mother-in-law called," he said. "She seems very involved." I just smiled tightly and handed him the envelope. When I confronted David about it later, he seemed genuinely baffled. "She's probably just worried about our plans," he said. "You know how she is. She likes to be kept in the loop." "David," she called our landlord, "that's not being in the loop. That's invading our privacy." He rubbed his eyes. He looked tired, not just physically, but soul tired, the way you get when you've been caught between two people you love for too long. "I'll talk to her," he said. "I'll tell her to back off a little." He did talk to her. I know because I heard him on the phone that night, using his gentle voice, his appeasing voice, the voice he used when he was trying not to upset her. "Mom, you can't call our landlord. I know you were just curious. No, I'm not saying you did anything wrong. Yes, I know you love us. Okay, Mom, I love you too." The calls from the landlord stopped, but the pattern didn't. It just shifted, adapted, found new avenues. Because that's what Beverly did. She found ways around every boundary, every limit, like water finding cracks in a foundation. Persistent, patient, relentless. And then, in the third year of our marriage, came the gift. The car. the silver Hyundai Tucson with the red bow. The thing that changed everything. It was a Wednesday evening in early March when the car appeared. I remember the day with perfect clarity because it had been one of those shifts at work that leaves you feeling hollowed out, the kind where everything that can go wrong does. A nervous 12-year-old who cried through his entire sealant procedure. A woman in her 60s who spent 45 minutes telling me about her divorce while I tried to floss around her words. A broken suction tube that sprayed water across my scrubs. A coworker who called in sick, leaving me to cover her patients on top of my own. By the time I pulled into our apartment complex that evening, I was running on fumes. My back ached. My feet throbbed. My Honda Civic, a 2009 with 187,000 miles, a cracked windshield I kept meaning to fix, and an air conditioning system that had surrendered somewhere around 2021, shuddered as I turned off the engine, like it was as exhausted as I was. I sat there for a moment, eyes closed, gathering the energy to walk inside. And then I saw it. A silver Hyundai Tucson, parked in the second spot. Our second spot, the one we never used because we only had one car between us. It was gleaming under the parking lot lights, so knew it still had the dealer sticker in the corner of the windshield. And on the hood, like something out of a Christmas commercial, was an enormous red bow. I blinked, looked again, the car was still there. David was standing beside it, grinning so wide I could see every tooth. And next to him, her hands clasped in front of her, her posture perfect, her expression arranged into something that might pass for warmth if you didn't look too closely, was Beverly. I got out of my Civic slowly, my tired brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "Surprise," David said, walking toward me with his arms outstretched. "What do you think?" I looked at the car, then at Beverly, then back at David. I don't understand," I said. Beverly stepped forward. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and pearl earrings, her good pearls, the ones she saved for important occasions. Her silver hair was pinned back in that careful way she always wore it, every strand in its place, obedient. "Naomi," she said, and her voice had that practiced warmth to it, smooth and sweet like honey poured over something bitter. "I know we haven't always been as close as I'd like, and I know that old car of yours has been giving you trouble. All those repairs, all that worry about breaking down on the highway." She reached out and took my hands. Her palms were cool and dry, her grip firm. I just thought, well, you're family, and family takes care of each other. I stood there in that parking lot, the March air still carrying the last bite of winter, and I felt something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes. A new car was a new car, and the Civic really was on borrowed time. But beneath the gratitude was something else, a whisper of unease, a faint alarm bell ringing somewhere in the back of my skull. Why now? I thought, why this? What's the catch? But even as the thoughts formed, I pushed them away. Because what kind of person suspects a gift? What kind of ungrateful, paranoid daughter-in-law looks at a brand new car with a bow on it and thinks, what are you really up to? A difficult one, a bitter one, the kind of woman Beverly probably already believed I was. So I swallowed my doubts. I hugged her. I said thank you, and I meant it, or at least, I meant to mean it. David beamed like a child on Christmas morning. Beverly patted my back twice, the way you might pat a dog that had finally learned to sit. "You're welcome, sweetheart," she said. "I just want you to be safe." That night, after Beverly left, David and I sat on the couch with leftover pasta and Professor Whiskers curled between us. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching it. I kept glancing out the window at the parking lot below, where the Tucson sat gleaming under the lights. "So," I said carefully, "how exactly did this happen?" David twirled spaghetti around his fork. "Mom's been talking about it for a few weeks. She was worried about you driving that old Civic, especially with winter weather. She said she's been sitting on some of Dad's life insurance money for years and wanted to do something meaningful with it." "That's a lot of money, David." "I know," he shrugged, a forkful of pasta halfway to his mouth. "But she wanted to. She said she's been thinking about it for a while and she finally decided to just do it." "Is it in my name?" "Yeah, she handled everything. Title, registration, insurance for the first 6 months. She said she wanted it to be fully yours. He smiled at me, that open, earnest smile I fell in love with. No strings attached. No strings attached. The words echoed in my head, hollow and somehow ominous. I think she's really trying, Nay, David said softly. I know she can be difficult, but this is her way of showing she cares. Can you just give her a chance? I looked at my husband, this good, kind man who loved his mother despite everything, who wanted so badly for the 2 women in his life to find peace. How could I tell him that I didn't trust her? How could I explain the cold feeling in my stomach, the instinct screaming that something was wrong? I couldn't, not without sounding paranoid, not without confirming every negative thing Beverly had probably ever said about me. So I leaned into him and rested my head on his shoulder. You're right, I said. I'll give her a chance. I drove the Tucson to work the next morning with the windows cracked and the radio playing. The seat still smelled like new car, that chemical, plasticky scent that's supposed to mean fresh starts and good fortune. The engine purred. The steering was smooth. Everything about it felt like a gift, like something I should be grateful for. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. That somewhere beneath the surface, something was watching, waiting. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I wish I had listened to my instincts instead. The shift started about 3 weeks after I got the car. Subtle at first. So subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. The first incident happened at Sunday dinner. We were seated around Beverly's dining table, the good china, as always, the pot roast steaming in the center, the green beans in their silver serving dish. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it had always been. And then Beverly said, casually between bites, So, Naomi, I heard you've been going to that new coffee shop on Canton Road. The one with the blue awning. How is it? I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. I had been to that coffee shop. The previous Saturday, on my way home from running errands, I'd stopped there on a whim. A quick detour. 15 minutes, maybe 20. I hadn't posted about it anywhere. I hadn't mentioned it to David. It wasn't the kind of thing you mention, just a random stop for a latte on a Saturday afternoon. How did you know I went there? I asked. Beverly's expression didn't change. Not a single muscle moved. Oh, I think David mentioned it. I looked at David. He had that slightly blank look men get when they're being pulled into something they don't understand and would prefer to avoid. I don't think I did, he said slowly. Did I? Beverly waved a hand, dismissive. Oh, maybe I just saw your car in the area. I was driving past and thought I recognized it. She laughed, a small, controlled sound, like a bird call she had rehearsed until it sounded natural. That silver Tucson is hard to miss. I nodded. I let it go. I finished my dinner and made small talk and helped clear the dishes. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small alarm had begun to pulse. Faint, barely audible. Beep. The second incident was the following week. I had a dental hygienist conference in Atlanta, not downtown, but out near Buckhead. Continuing education credits, the kind of thing you have to do every year to keep your license. I'd told David about it weeks in advance, marked it on our shared calendar, reminded him the night before. But I hadn't told Beverly. There was no reason to. I didn't report my schedule to my mother-in-law. She wasn't my supervisor. She wasn't my parent. She was just Beverly. The conference ran late, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted. David and I were standing in the kitchen, clearing the remnants of the takeout he'd picked up, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His eyebrows drew together slightly. It's Mom, he said. She's asking how your conference was, the one in Buckhead. The kitchen went very quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the faucet. Professor Whiskers crunching kibble in the corner, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. I didn't tell her about the conference, I said. Neither did I. David stared at his phone for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. Maybe you mentioned it at dinner last week and forgot. I didn't. He looked up at me, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not suspicion, exactly. Not concern. More like discomfort, the kind that comes when you sense something is wrong but you're not ready to acknowledge what it might be. She probably just heard it somewhere, he said finally. You know how she is, she talks to everyone. Right, I said. She talks to everyone. But that night, lying in bed while David slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and let myself think the thought I'd been pushing away for weeks. How does she always know where I am? The third incident was the one that finally broke through my denial. I didn't tell David I was going to the gym. I didn't tell anyone. I just grabbed my bag one evening after work, drove to a fitness center I'd never been to, one across town, in an area I had no connection to, and spent an hour on the treadmill, trying to outrun my own suspicions. No one knew I was there. No one could have known. But at Sunday dinner, 3 days later, Beverly looked up from her mashed potatoes and said, Naomi, I hear you're trying a new gym. That place near the Publix on Johnson Ferry Road. How do you like it? The room tilted, just slightly, just enough to make me grip the edge of the table. Who told you that? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Beverly blinked, all innocence. I think I must have driven past and seen your car, or maybe David mentioned it. David shook his head. I didn't even know she went to a new gym. Well, someone told me. Beverly smiled, serene as a saint. My memory isn't what it used to be. I'm sure it'll come back to me. She returned to her mashed potatoes. Conversation moved on to other things. The weather, David's work, a new restaurant Beverly wanted to try. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was doing the math, the coffee shop, the conference, the gym. 3 places. 3 times Beverly knew exactly where I'd been, places I hadn't told her about, places I hadn't posted about, places I had no reason to share with anyone. And the only common thread between all 3. The car. I wish I could tell you I figured it out immediately. That I was sharp enough, smart enough, suspicious enough to connect the dots right away and confront Beverly with irrefutable evidence. But the truth is, I spent another 2 weeks convincing myself I was crazy. Every time I started to think about the pattern, the coffee shop, the conference, the gym, I'd talk myself out of it. You're being paranoid, Naomi. You're letting your dislike of Beverly cloud your judgment. She's just a lonely old woman who talks too much and knows too many people. There's no conspiracy here. There's no sinister plot. You're the problem, not her. That's what gaslighting does to you, you know. Not just from other people, from yourself. When you've spent years being made to feel like the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the one who can't just get along, you start to internalize it. You start to doubt your own instincts. You start to wonder if maybe everyone else is right and you're the one who's broken. But the comments kept coming. Every Sunday, every dinner. Beverly knew I'd gone to Target on a Tuesday afternoon. She knew I'd stopped by the church to drop off donations on a Thursday morning. She knew I'd driven to Marietta Square to meet my friend Carla for lunch, even though I'd told no one about that meeting except Carla herself. Each time I'd freeze. Each time David would offer an explanation. Maybe she saw my car, maybe I mentioned it, maybe someone told her. And each time I'd let it go because the alternative was too strange, too invasive, too disturbing to accept. But late at night, when the house was dark and David was breathing softly beside me, I'd lie awake and stare at the ceiling and feel the truth pressing against my chest like a weight. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. It was a Tuesday night when I finally gave in to my suspicions. David was working late, some crisis at the freight company, shipments delayed, phones ringing off the hook. I was home alone with Professor Whiskers, sitting on our beige couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. And then, almost without meaning to, I typed something into the search bar. How do you know if someone is tracking your car? My finger hovered over the search button for a long moment. Part of me felt ridiculous, like I was about to dive down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and paranoid delusions. But another part of me, the part that had been keeping count for months, the part that had felt Beverly's eyes on me since the day I walked down that church aisle, that part said, just look, just see. I pressed search. The results came flooding in. Articles about GPS trackers, Reddit threads about suspicious spouses, YouTube videos with titles like, "I found a tracker on my vehicle, here's what it looked like." Forum posts from women, mostly women, who had discovered that someone was monitoring their every move. I read for over an hour. My tea went cold beside me. Professor Whiskers fell asleep in my lap, purring, oblivious. GPS trackers, I learned, came in all shapes and sizes. Some were hardwired into the vehicle's electrical system. Those were harder to find, usually installed by professionals. But others were simpler, battery-powered, magnetic. The kind you could buy on Amazon for $50 and attach to a car in under a minute. And the most common placement, according to multiple sources, was underneath the vehicle, near the wheel wells, near the rear axle, tucked up high where no one would think to look unless they were specifically looking. I sat there in the dim light of our living room, the phone glowing in my hands, and I felt my heart beating in my throat. She wouldn't, I told myself. She's difficult, yes. She's controlling, yes. She's manipulative and cold and impossible to please. But she wouldn't go that far. She wouldn't actually track me like some kind of criminal. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. Because Beverly Ann Thornton didn't do anything halfway. Every gift came with strings. Every kindness came with conditions. Every gesture of generosity was a transaction, and she always expected to be repaid. The car, the beautiful, shiny, too-good-to-be-true car. It had never been a gift. It had been a surveillance system, and I had been driving it around for months, thanking her for it, never once suspecting that she was watching my every move. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes open, mind racing, while David snored softly beside me. Part of me wanted to wake him up, to shake him and say, "I think your mother put a tracker on my car. I think she's been monitoring me. I think everything I believed about her being difficult was actually the tip of a much darker iceberg." But I didn't, because I knew what would happen if I did. David would be confused, defensive. He'd ask questions I couldn't fully answer yet. He'd want to confront Beverly immediately, and she would deny everything. She would cry or deflect or turn it around on me. She would say I was paranoid, that I had always been suspicious of her, that I was trying to drive a wedge between her and her only son. And David, caught in the middle, would do what he always did, try to keep the peace, try to smooth things over, try to find a compromise that left everyone equally unhappy. No, I couldn't tell him yet, not until I had proof. Proof she couldn't explain away. Saturday morning. David was gone by 9 a.m. He'd promised to help a coworker move apartments, a favor that would keep him busy most of the day. I made coffee. I drank it slowly. I watched through the window as his truck disappeared around the corner. And then I went outside. The morning was cool, that early spring chill that still carries the memory of winter. The sky was pale gray, the sun not quite broken through. The apartment complex was quiet, a few birds singing, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, but no people, no witnesses. I walked to the Tucson, my Tucson, the gift. For a long moment, I just stood there looking at it. The silver paint, the clean lines, the Hyundai logo on the front grille, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I thought about all the places that car had taken me over the past 4 months. Work and back 5 days a week. The grocery store on Thursday evenings. The gym, both my regular gym and the new one I'd tried as a test. Carla's house. The church. The coffee shop with the blue awning. Every errand, every detour, every spontaneous stop. And I thought about Beverly, sitting in her immaculate house with her immaculate hair, watching a little dot move across a screen. Tracking me, cataloging me, building a map of my life that she had no right to possess. My hands were steady as I lowered myself to the ground. The asphalt was cold and rough against my palms. Small pebbles pressed into my skin as I army crawled beneath the rear of the car, my phone flashlight clutched in one hand. It was dark under there, all shadows and metal and shapes I didn't recognize. The undercarriage of a car is a strange landscape when you're not a mechanic. Pipes and panels and things you can't name, all covered in a thin layer of road grime. I swept the flashlight beam slowly, methodically, left to right, front to back. Nothing, nothing. I was about to give up, about to tell myself that I really was paranoid, that I'd been watching too many crime documentaries, that Beverly was just a nosy woman with an uncanny ability to guess where I'd been. And then I saw it. Near the rear axle, exactly where the articles said to look. A small black box, maybe the size of a deck of cards, maybe a little smaller, attached to the metal frame with two heavy-duty zip ties. It was tucked up tight against the underside of the car, positioned so you'd never notice it unless you were actively searching. I stared at it for a long time. The flashlight beam didn't waver. My hands didn't shake. I felt strangely calm, the way you feel when your worst suspicion is confirmed and you no longer have to wonder. When the thing you feared becomes the thing you know, and the uncertainty that was eating you alive finally dissolves into cold, hard fact. I reached up and touched it. The plastic was smooth, cold, completely ordinary looking. A GPS tracker, hidden under the car that Beverly had given me as a gift. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't hearing things from neighbors. She wasn't just happening to drive past the same coffee shops and parking lots where I happened to be. She was watching me, every mile, every stop, every turn. She had been tracking my movements for 4 months, and she had been using that information to remind me, in her quiet, smiling, controlled way, that I could never truly escape her. I pulled myself out from under the car and sat back on my heels. The sky had brightened. A jogger passed by on the sidewalk, earbuds in, completely oblivious to the woman kneeling in the parking lot with a cracked open heart and a phone full of evidence. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I could feel the tears pressing behind my eyes like water against a dam, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Crying was for later. For now, I needed to think. I needed to decide what I was going to do. The first thing I did was take pictures, dozens of them. I photographed the tracker from every angle I could manage while lying on my back on that cold asphalt. Close-ups of the device itself, the zip ties holding it in place, the exact location on the rear axle, the relationship between the tracker and the wheel well, the exhaust pipe, the surrounding components. I took a video, too, narrating quietly as I moved the camera across the undercarriage, documenting exactly where the device was hidden and what it looked like. "This is March 23rd, I said softly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "This is underneath the 2023 Hyundai Tucson that was given to me by my mother-in-law, Beverly Thornton, in early November of last year. I'm showing the location of what appears to be a GPS tracking device attached to the rear axle with zip ties." I didn't know yet exactly how I would use this evidence, but I knew I needed it. Beverly was smart. She was careful. She had spent decades perfecting the art of plausible deniability, of making herself look innocent while everyone around her questioned their own sanity. If I was going to expose her, I needed proof she couldn't explain away. I saved everything to a locked folder on my phone, the kind that required a fingerprint and a passcode to open. Then I backed it up to my email, my cloud storage, and a USB drive I kept in my work locker. Redundancy, documentation, protection. The second thing I did, and this surprised even me, was leave the tracker exactly where it was. My first instinct had been to rip it off, to tear it from the axle, throw it in the dumpster, drive to Beverly's house and throw the pieces at her feet while I screamed every curse word I'd been swallowing for 3 years. But something stopped me. That same small, quiet voice that had been trying to warn me for months, the voice I'd spent so long ignoring, now spoke clearly. "Don't show your hand. Not yet. Let her think she still has control." If I removed the tracker, Beverly would know I'd found it. She might claim someone else put it there. She might say it came with the car from the dealership. She might spin some story about how she was just worried about my safety, how she'd heard about carjackings in Atlanta, how she never meant any harm. And David, my sweet, conflict-averse, mother-loving David, might believe her. Or at least, he might want to believe her enough to accept her explanation. No, I needed to catch her. Not just confront her, catch her. In a way that left no room for interpretation, no space for her to wriggle free. I needed to set a trap. The plan came to me slowly, over the course of the next 2 weeks. I went about my life as normally as possible. I drove the Tucson to work and back. I stopped at the grocery store, the gym, the gas station. I attended Sunday dinner at Beverly's house, smiled through her questions, helped with the dishes, kissed her cheek when we left. And all the while, she kept dropping her little comments. She knew I'd been to the post office on Monday. She knew I'd stopped at the outlet mall on Wednesday. She knew I'd visited Carla's house on Saturday, even though I'd told David I was going to the library. Each time I smiled. Each time I let it go. Each time I added another note to the mental file I was building. She's watching. She's always watching. But now, instead of making me feel powerless, that knowledge gave me strength. Because now I was watching too. Watching her. Studying her patterns. Learning how she operated. And planning. The key, I realized, was to give Beverly something she couldn't resist. Something that would override her usual caution. Something that would make her act impulsively, without thinking through the consequences. Something that threatened her position in David's life. I thought about what mattered most to Beverly. It wasn't David's happiness, not really. If it were, she would have let him go. She would have supported his marriage, welcomed his wife, allowed him to build his own life. No, what Beverly cared about was control, possession, the certainty that David belonged to her first, last, and always. The thing she feared most wasn't losing David's love. It was losing David himself, losing access to him, being replaced by someone else, being replaced by me. So I decided to give her exactly that fear. I decided to make her believe she was about to lose everything. And then I would watch her reveal herself. I chose my moment carefully. David and I were lying in bed one night, the lights off, Professor Whiskers purring at our feet. We'd been talking about nothing in particular, work stress, weekend plans, whether we should finally fix the leaky faucet or just call a plumber. And then, in the dark, I said, "David, I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me." He went still beside me. "What is it?" "I can't explain everything yet, but something is happening with your mother, and I need to prove it to you. The only way I can do that is if you help me without asking too many questions right now." Silence. I could feel him processing, trying to decide how to respond. "Naomi, what's going on?" "I promise I'll tell you everything soon. But if I tell you now, you'll confront her, and she'll deny it, and we'll be right back where we've always been, you in the middle, me looking paranoid, her playing the victim." I turned toward him in the darkness. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his warmth, his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Do you trust me?" I asked. Another pause, then, "You know I do." "Then I need you to do something that's going to sound strange. I need you to tell your mother, and only your mother, that I'm meeting with a divorce attorney this Saturday. That I've been unhappy for a while and I'm exploring my options." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "Naomi, do you want?" "No." I reached out and found his hand, gripping it tightly. "No, David, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. But I need Beverly to believe that I am. I need her to think she's about to lose her access to you, and I need to see what she does with that information." "I don't understand." "You will, I promise. Just do this for me. Tell her on Thursday. Make it sound casual, like you're worried, like you don't know what to do. And then on Saturday, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He was quiet for a long time. I held his hand and waited, feeling my heart pound in the darkness. Finally, he exhaled. "Okay," he said softly. "I don't understand what's happening, but I trust you. If you say this is important, then it's important." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you. Just promise me we're okay. Promise me this isn't real." "We're okay," I said. "We're more than okay. After Saturday, you'll understand everything." He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. and I began to count down the days. Thursday came. David called his mother in the evening, while I sat in the next room, listening. "Hey, Mom. Yeah, I'm okay. Well, actually, I don't know, I'm a little worried about something. It's Naomi. She's been distant lately, and I don't know how to say this, but I found something in her email. She's been talking to a divorce attorney. There's a meeting scheduled for Saturday afternoon. No, I haven't confronted her yet. I don't know what to say. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, I know you've always said. Mom, please, I just needed to tell someone. I'm scared." His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I felt a stab of guilt. I was making him lie to his own mother, making him feel the fear of losing his marriage, even though it wasn't real. But then I thought about the tracker under my car, the months of surveillance, the smug comments at Sunday dinner, the way Beverly had been mapping my life without my knowledge or consent. And the guilt dissolved. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about truth. And sometimes, the only way to expose the truth is to create the conditions for it to reveal itself. David hung up the phone. He came into the living room looking pale, drained. "It's done," he said. She was really upset. Kept saying she knew something like this would happen, that she'd tried to warn me about you. I nodded slowly. "And what did you say?" "I said I didn't want to talk about it, that I needed to think, that I'd call her after the weekend." "Good." I walked over and wrapped my arms around him. "You did great. Now we just have to wait." "Wait for what?" I looked up at him, this man I loved, this man who had been caught between two women for too long. "For your mother to make her move." Saturday arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the kind of heavy, humid air that makes Georgia feel like it's holding its breath. I woke early before David, before the sun had fully risen, and lay in bed watching the light slowly change against the ceiling. Professor Whiskers was curled at my feet, his orange fur warm against my ankles. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and David's steady breathing beside me. Today was the day everything would change. Either I was right about Beverly, and she would expose herself completely, or I was wrong, and I would have to find a way to explain to my husband why I'd made him lie to his mother about our marriage falling apart. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't wrong. I knew I wasn't wrong. The tracker was real. The surveillance was real. The pattern of Beverly knowing things she had no business knowing, that was real too. Today, I would prove it. The plan was simple, which is what made it elegant. I had chosen a location, a small, secluded park on the outskirts of Roswell, about 40 minutes from Beverly's house. It was the kind of place you'd never stumble upon accidentally, surrounded by trees, accessible only by a narrow gravel road, with nothing nearby except forest and the distant hum of the highway. There was no reason for anyone to be there unless they were specifically looking for it, unless they had followed someone there, unless they had tracked someone there. I had told David, and only David, that my fictional meeting with the divorce attorney was scheduled for 2 p.m. at this park. The attorney's name was Linda Walsh. We would be meeting in her car to discuss my options. It was a ridiculous cover story, the kind that wouldn't hold up under any scrutiny. But that was the point. I wasn't trying to create a believable scenario. I was trying to create irresistible bait. If Beverly was monitoring my location through the tracker, and I was certain she was, she would see me drive to this remote park in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. She would remember what David had told her about the divorce attorney. She would put 2 and 2 together. And she would not be able to resist coming to see for herself. She would have to know. She would have to be there to witness, to gather ammunition, to confirm her worst fears about the daughter-in-law who was trying to steal her son. Beverly's need for control would override her caution. Her fear of losing David would override her careful mask of innocence. She would come, I was certain of it. And when she did, David would be there to witness it. I left the apartment at 1:15 p.m. David hugged me at the door, his arms tight around me, his face drawn with worry. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I still don't fully understand what we're doing." "I know. I pulled back and looked up at him, this man I loved more than I'd ever thought possible. But after today, you will, I promise. I hate this. I hate lying to my mother. I hate not knowing what's happening. I know you do. I reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. Just trust me a little longer. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. I'll be there at 1:45, just like we planned. Park on the side road out of sight. Don't let her see your truck. I need her to think I'm alone. And if she doesn't show up? I smiled, though there was no humor in it. She'll show up. I kissed him a real kiss, deep and lingering, and then I walked out the door. The drive to the park took about 35 minutes. I took the highway out of the city, then exited onto a series of increasingly narrow roads that wound through pine forest and past the occasional farmhouse. The sky stayed gray, heavy, with the threat of rain that never quite arrived. I thought about Beverly as I drove, about all the Sunday dinners I'd endured, all the passive-aggressive comments I'd absorbed, all the times I'd bitten my tongue, swallowed my anger, told myself to be patient, to be understanding, to be the bigger person. I thought about the way she looked at me, that cold, calculating gaze that never warmed, no matter how hard I tried to earn her approval. I thought about the tracker, sitting beneath my car at this very moment, sending my coordinates to whatever app she used to monitor my movements. She was watching me right now, watching the little dot that represented my car, that represented me, moving across the map toward this remote, secluded park. What was she thinking? What was she feeling? Triumph, probably. Validation. I knew it, she was probably saying to herself. I knew she would try to leave him. I knew she was never good enough. She had no idea that she was driving toward her own unmasking. I arrived at the park at 1:50 p.m. The gravel lot was empty, just me and the trees and the heavy gray sky pressing down. I pulled the Tucson into a space near the center, turned off the engine, and sat there in the silence. Through the windshield, I could see the hiking trail that led into the forest. A weathered wooden sign marked the entrance, Sweetwater Trail, 2.3 miles. In the distance, a bird called out, its song echoing through the trees. It was peaceful here, beautiful even, the kind of place you'd come to think, to breathe, to escape the chaos of everyday life. But I wasn't here to escape. I was here to confront. I checked my phone. 1:52 p.m. David should be arriving any minute, parking on the side road I'd identified on Google Maps, close enough to see the main lot, but hidden by a curve in the road and a thick stand of pine trees. I texted him, I'm here, you in position. A moment later, his reply just pulled in. I can see the lot, I can see your car. Good, now we wait. What if she doesn't come? I stared at the screen, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. She'll come, I typed, trust me. I set the phone in my lap and returned my gaze to the lot entrance. The gravel road curved away into the trees, disappearing around a bend. From where I sat, I would see any approaching vehicle before it reached the lot. The minutes stretched, 1:55, 1:57, 1:59. 2 o'clock. Nothing. 2:02, 2:04. Still nothing. A cold thread of doubt began to wind through my chest. What if I was wrong? What if Beverly wasn't monitoring the tracker? What if all those comments at Sunday dinner were just coincidences, just her uncanny ability to guess, just my own paranoid imagination connecting dots that weren't really there? What if I had put David through all of this? The lies, the fear, the deception for nothing. 2:07, 2:09. And then I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel, the low hum of an engine approaching. I sat up straighter, my heart suddenly pounding. A car appeared around the bend, cream-colored, sleek, familiar. Beverly's Lexus. She pulled into the lot slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. She parked 3 spaces away from me, close enough to see, far enough to maintain the pretense of coincidence. I watched her through my windshield. She didn't get out immediately. I could see her silhouette through the tinted glass, sitting motionless, watching me, perhaps trying to decide how to play this. My phone buzzed. David, Is that Mom's car?" "Yes." "Oh my God, she actually came." "I know, stay where you are, don't come out yet. I need to talk to her first." "Naomi." "Trust me." I set the phone down and opened my car door. The air outside was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of pine and wet earth. Somewhere in the forest, that same bird was still singing, a clear, bright melody that seemed completely at odds with what was about to happen. I walked toward Beverly's car. My footsteps crunched on the gravel, impossibly loud in the silence. She opened her door. Beverly stepped out slowly, smoothing her slacks with her palms as if she were arriving at a garden party rather than a secluded parking lot where she had no business being. She was wearing a pale blue cardigan and her pearl earrings, the good ones, as always, and her silver hair was pinned back with that perfect, immovable precision. Her face was arranged into an expression of mild surprise, eyebrows slightly raised, lips curved in a small, polite smile, the mask firmly in place. "Naomi," she said, her voice warm and calm, "what a surprise seeing you here." I stopped about 10 feet away from her, close enough to see the calculation in her eyes, far enough to feel like I had room to breathe. "Is it a surprise, Beverly?" I asked. "Is it really?" Something flickered across her face, just for a second, a crack in the porcelain. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her tone still light, still pleasant. "I was just taking a drive, enjoying the scenery. This is a lovely area, isn't it? I used to bring David here when he was a boy. He probably doesn't remember, he was so young." She was good, so good. Even now, with the trap closing around her, she had a story ready, an explanation, a plausible excuse. "Beverly," I said quietly, "this park is 40 minutes from your house. There's nothing out here, no stores, no restaurants, no people, just trees and a gravel parking lot. I told you I was just—" "Stop!" My voice came out sharper than I intended, cutting through the humid air like a blade. "Just stop." She went silent. The polite smile faded, replaced by something harder, something closer to her true face. "I know about the tracker," I said. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us moved. The bird in the forest had stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "I found it 3 weeks ago," I continued. "The GPS device you hid under the car you gave me. The one that's been sending you my location every moment of every day. The one that told you about the coffee shop, the conference, the gym, the restaurant in Alpharetta." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of photos. I turned the screen toward her, showing her the images I'd taken, the black box, the zip ties, the exact placement on the rear axle. "I have pictures, videos, documentation with timestamps. I have evidence of every time you made a comment about somewhere I'd been, places I never told anyone about. I wrote it all down, Beverly. Dates, times, what you said, who was present." Her face had gone pale, the color draining away like water from a broken vase. "There was no divorce attorney," I said. "There is no Linda Walsh. I made it up. I told David to tell you about the meeting and only you. No one else knew, not Carla, not my coworkers, not anyone on this earth except my husband and my mother-in-law." I stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd known her, Beverly took a step back. "And here you are," I said softly, 40 minutes from home, in a park you claimed you used to bring David to as a boy, which is funny, because David told me he's never been to this park in his life. 5 minutes before my fictional appointment was supposed to start. The silence stretched between us, like a wire pulled taut. "You followed the tracker here," I said, "because you couldn't stand the thought of me doing something you didn't know about. You couldn't stand the thought of losing control over your son's life, so you came to spy, to gather information, to find something you could use against me." Beverly's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in 3 years, she was utterly, completely speechless. "Everything I've done," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "has been to protect my son. From me. From making a mistake." Her composure was cracking now, her voice rising with something that sounded almost like desperation. "David deserves better. He's always deserved better. And you, with your boundaries, your opinions, your constant need to pull him away from his family, I knew from the beginning you weren't right for him. So you tracked me, spied on me, treated me like a criminal for 4 months. I was protecting him. No, Beverly. I shook my head slowly. You were trying to control him, there's a difference. Beverly's eyes were wet now, glistening with tears that might have been real or might have been performance. With her, I could never quite tell. Her hands were trembling at her sides, her careful composure crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. You could never understand. David is all I have. He's the only thing Harold left me, the only thing that matters. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something soften in my chest. I saw the woman beneath the manipulation, the widow who had lost her husband too young, the mother who had watched her son grow up and move on and build a life that didn't revolve around her anymore. I understood loneliness. I understood grief. I understood the desperate need to hold on to the people you love, to keep them close, to never let them go. But understanding wasn't the same as accepting. And what Beverly had done went far beyond the excusable boundaries of maternal love. I do understand, I said quietly. I understand that you're lonely. I understand that losing Harold broke something inside you. I understand that watching David build a life with me felt like losing him too. Beverly's lower lip trembled. A single tear escaped, trailing down her powdered cheek. But this, I continued, gesturing toward my car, toward the tracker hidden beneath it. This isn't love, Beverly. This is control. This is surveillance. This is treating me like a suspect instead of a daughter. I never meant. You put a GPS device on my car. You monitored every mile I drove for 4 months. You used that information to remind me, week after week, that I couldn't go anywhere without you knowing. Do you have any idea how that feels? Do you have any idea what it's like to realize that someone has been watching your every move, tracking you like you're some kind of animal they need to keep on a leash? Beverly didn't answer. She just stood there, her tears falling freely now, her mask completely shattered. And that was when David stepped out of the trees. He had been watching the whole time, parked on the side road, just like we planned, listening through the car window that he'd cracked open. I didn't know exactly how much he'd heard, but from the look on his face, pale, shocked, devastated, I knew it had been enough. "Mom," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the tremor beneath it, the earthquake happening just below the surface. Beverly spun around. Her eyes went wide, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been shot. "David, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" He walked toward us slowly, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on his mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Hurt, betrayal, the dawning realization that the woman he'd trusted his entire life had been lying to him. "I've been here the whole time," he said. "I heard everything." "David, please, you have to let me explain." "Explain what, Mom?" His voice cracked. "Explain how you put a tracker on my wife's car. Explain how you've been spying on her for months. Explain how you came all the way out here, 40 minutes from your house, to a park you've never been to because you couldn't stand the thought of her doing something you didn't control." Beverly reached for him, her hands grasping at the air. "I was trying to protect you, baby. I was trying to protect our family. She's going to take you away from me, don't you see? She's been trying to separate us from the very beginning." "No, Mom." David shook his head slowly. "Naomi has never tried to separate us. She's bent over backward to include you, to make you feel welcome, to earn your approval, and you've punished her for it every step of the way." "That's not true." "It is true." His voice was rising now, the controlled calm giving way to raw emotion. "I've watched you belittle her for 3 years. I've heard your comments about her hair, her clothes, her cooking, her job. I've seen the way you look at her when you think no one's watching. And I told myself it was just adjustment, just you learning to share me with someone else." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "But this, tracking her car, monitoring her every move, coming here to spy on a meeting that didn't even exist." He pressed his hands to his face, his shoulders shaking. "How could you do this? How could you do this to someone I love?" Beverly was sobbing now, ugly, gasping sobs that echoed through the empty parking lot. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said between breaths. "I just wanted to know that she was being faithful. I wanted to know that she wasn't lying to you. I was trying to protect you, David. Everything I've ever done has been to protect you." "That's not protection, Mom. That's surveillance. That's control. That's—" He stopped, struggling to find the words. "That's exactly what Dad always said you did. He said you needed to know everything, needed to control everything, needed to be at the center of every decision. I never wanted to believe him, but he was right, wasn't he?" Beverly's face contorted with pain. "Don't bring your father into this. Harold didn't understand me. He never understood me." "Maybe he understood you better than any of us." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. David turned away from his mother. He walked toward me, his eyes red-rimmed, his jaw tight. He took my hands in his palms were cold, trembling slightly, and he looked at me with an expression that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I made excuses for her. I'm sorry I put you through this." "David." "No, let me finish." He squeezed my hands. "You were right about all of it, and I should have trusted you. I should have listened when you said something was wrong. Instead, I kept trying to keep the peace, kept trying to make everyone happy, and I ended up making no one happy." He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. I pressed my face against his chest and felt his heart pounding, fast, erratic, the heart of a man whose world had just shifted on its axis. "I choose you," he whispered against my hair. "I will always choose you." Behind us, Beverly made a sound, something between a gasp and a wail. "David, please," she said, her voice raw and desperate. "Please don't do this. Please don't let her turn you against me. I'm your mother. I raised you. I was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every—" "And I love you for that," David said, turning to face her but keeping one arm around me. "I will always love you for that, but love doesn't mean accepting everything someone does. And right now, I can't accept this." He took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, final. "We're leaving now, and I need some time. Time to process this. Time to decide what our relationship looks like going forward." "David." "Don't call me for a while, Mom. Don't text. Don't show up at our apartment. Just give me space. Give us space. Can you do that?" Beverly stood there in the middle of that gravel parking lot, her arms hanging limp at her sides, her face ravaged by tears. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like someone had let the air out of her. "How much space?" she whispered. "I don't know." David's voice cracked on the words. "I don't know yet." He turned away from her. He took my hand, and together we walked to our cars. I don't know how long Beverly stood there after we left. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I drove home in a daze, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my mind replaying every moment of that confrontation. David followed behind me in his truck, and when we got home, we walked into our apartment without speaking. Professor Whiskers greeted us at the door, meowing for attention, oblivious to the earthquake that had just reshaped our lives. David scooped him up and held him against his chest, burying his face in the orange fur. "I need to sit down," he said, his voice muffled. We sat on the couch, the same beige couch where we'd watched movies and eaten takeout and built a life together. David still held Professor Whiskers, stroking him mechanically, his eyes staring at nothing. "I can't believe she did that," he said finally. "I can't believe my own mother." He trailed off. I didn't try to fill the silence. Some silences need to be sat in, felt, processed. "How long do you think she was tracking you?" he asked. "Since she gave me the car. For months at least." He closed his eyes. "4 months. Every day for 4 months she's been watching where you go." "Yes." "And all those comments at Sunday dinner, about the coffee shop, the gym, the restaurant. She was showing me that she knew, reminding me that I couldn't go anywhere without her finding out." David shook his head slowly, like he was trying to shake off a bad dream. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, when you first found the tracker?" I took a breath. This was the question I'd been dreading. Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, I said honestly. I was afraid you'd confront her and she'd deny it and she'd make me look paranoid. She's so good at that, David. So good at twisting things, at making herself the victim. I needed proof she couldn't explain away. I needed you to see it with your own eyes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You were right, he said. If you'd told me before, I don't know what I would have done. I want to say I would have believed you, but honestly, I'm not sure. I've spent my whole life defending her, making excuses for her. He laughed bitterly. She trained me well. She's your mother. You love her. That's not something to be ashamed of. But I love you too, and I should have been protecting you. Instead, I was protecting her from consequences she deserved. He set Professor Whiskers down and turned to face me. His eyes were red, his face drawn with exhaustion and grief. I meant what I said, he told me. I choose you, today, tomorrow, always. I reached out and touched his face, feeling the stubble along his jaw, the warmth of his skin. I know, I said. I've always known. We didn't speak to Beverly for 3 months. Not a phone call, not a text message, not a Sunday dinner. For 92 days, the woman who had been a constant presence in our lives, a shadow that followed us everywhere, a voice that echoed through every decision, was simply gone. It was strange at first, disorienting. Like when you've had a ringing in your ears for so long that you've forgotten what silence sounds like, and then suddenly the ringing stops and you don't know what to do with the quiet. The first few weeks were the hardest. David would pick up his phone a dozen times a day, his thumb hovering over his mother's name in his contacts, before setting it down again. I'd catch him staring out the window sometimes, his expression distant, lost in memories I could only imagine. He grieved, not for Beverly's death, she was still alive, still in that immaculate house with its immaculate lawn, but for the mother he thought he had, the mother he wanted to believe in, the mother who, he now understood, had never really existed. I keep thinking about my childhood, he said one evening, about 3 weeks into our silence. We were sitting on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sun set over the Atlanta skyline, Professor Whiskers curled up between us. Trying to figure out when it started, the control, the manipulation. Maybe it was always there, I said gently. Maybe you just couldn't see it because you were inside it. He nodded slowly. My dad used to say things sometimes, little comments about Mom.